Thank you, Nachan. Okay, everyone, I'd like to start by saying thank you very much for the honor of your time, making time to listen to what I have to share. So just we're here to talk about demystifying fundraising, particularly in conservation, and to build on that, I thought it would be helpful to just give a little bit more of a background so that you know where I'm coming from and where all that knowledge is, sort of where it's all coming from in that sense. So I graduated from Aplori for my master's. I was from the second set, and I went on to work with the Nigerian Conservation Foundation on secondment from Aplori, moved on from there working for BirdLife International, and I had to, at different points, get involved with fundraising. I also had to fundraise for my PhD and for the various research projects. And I went on to work for through BirdLife. I worked for CMS, the Convention on Migratory Species, and one of the things that I learned working, whether in research, in management, or in policy, is that resources, financial resources, are key, and that is one big challenge to getting work done. So before going further, I'll also just mention that I'm normally based in Whitehorse in Yukon, Canada. So we have the Northern Lights, Aurora Borealis. In winter, the temperatures can drop to -40, -45. Here, the thermometer is showing -30. But it's a very beautiful place. But presently, I am actually in Nigeria physically, and next week I'll be speaking at the Aplori celebration in Jos. Okay, so back to the topic. We're talking about fundraising, and for many people, it's just about raising money. Um, but I thought that okay, sorry. So I thought that it would be interesting to change that because I had my perspective on fundraising changed very early in the game. I was told that it's actually about relationship building. So I'm going to begin by talking about the donor recipient relationship. This is one of two very important relationships that I think that everyone should be aware of when you are going into fundraising. So the first thing in that relationship between the donor and the recipient is to is for the recipient to first of all understand that it's not charity. Okay. When I was working with BirdLife International, um, I wrote a proposal for my PhD, for funding for my PhD, and the institutional fundraiser at the time agreed to review my project, my proposal. And she had a look at it, and then she called me into her office, and she said that it sounds like I was begging for money. And I was playing the poor African child, please give me money situation. And she said, thank you very much. So I'll continue then. So it was pointed out to me that the proposal that I had written, it basically felt that like I was begging for money and that no donor would take me seriously. And that's when I realized that fundraising, it's not about charity. Donors are not giving money away. It's not about that at all. From the donor's perspective, it is an investment. And as the recipient, you need to think like that. You need to understand that this is an investment on the part of the donor. And you need to present yourself as a secure investment to the donor. You need to understand what it is that the donor wants. So now there are many donors, and we're not going to get into the minefield of what each donor wants, but I'll just broadly, at a high level, some donors want to show themselves as supporting environmental work. Some want to show that they're supporting women. Some want to show that they're supporting indigenous groups. And what you want to do is frame your project to show that when it is successfully accomplished, the donor will get what they want. And that is that representation, whether locally or globally. So you need to show that you can get the job done. You are the person for the job. So you need a right balance of confidence, not overconfidence, but you shouldn't also be cap in hand, begging, if you give me the money, we'll be very, very grateful. No, that is not your tone at all. I hope that strikes a chord with some people. And then the last thing to mention is to understand that you are going to be maintaining a relationship. You're going to be building a relationship and you're going to be maintaining it. So building a relationship before the funding, but also maintaining it after the funding. So you want to, first impressions matter. So it's better to write a good first proposal than a weak one that you then have to build on. The second relationship to be aware of, and many friends and colleagues that I speak of often skip this one, is the donor to donor relationships. You kind of want to be aware, if you're applying to one particular donor, you want to be aware of what that is going to do to future fundraising activities that you will have. I'm going to make an example, but I'm going to sort of try to word it carefully. Now, there are certain organizations that might not want to work with the oil and gas sector. There are certain organizations that might not want to work with military and munition industries. Should you receive funding from them, you need to be aware of what that might mean for you as well. So I'm not saying don't take it. It's a matter of managing it, knowing who you're getting money from and what that will mean going forward. So you need to think about the co-financing and joint representation. There are some organizations that do not want their logos represented with certain other industry groups, and you need to be aware of that. Remember, you are presenting a secure investment for the donor. And many donors are concerned about their global and their local and global image. So how they look and what they look like. And sometimes they don't want you to also take funding from certain other organizations. So it's something to think about before you receive the money, or even before you even apply for the funding. So having talked about the relationship, this is my classification. I tend to think that there are two approaches to fundraising. There is the machine gun approach where you're just applying for everything, and then there is a sniper approach where you line up your shot and you take one shot, boom, 100% effectiveness, boom, next shot. Now, I am not necessarily judging one over the other. There are reasons for both. Sometimes we're balancing effectiveness versus efficiency. Sometimes you want to apply for everything that's out there. And sometimes you want to take your time and pick only the right applications, and then just apply for the ones that you stand the best chance of getting, and you save your energy for others. Whichever you decide to go with, it's going to be dependent on you and your circumstances. So this is not a judgment of it. Now, there is the FOMO as well, fear of missing out. Sometimes some people want to do the sniper approach, but then they hear that somebody has gotten funding from National Geographic and somebody has gotten funding from Disney. So they're like, okay, no, me too, I must go, and then they jump. They don't want to miss out. Again, depends on where you are. And as researchers, many of us have to deal with the imposter syndrome, as well as the pressure of publishing or perishing. and you start thinking, I need to get my research off the ground, I need to get money for it, so I should apply for everything that moves. If that is where you find yourself, all well and good, but you need to balance it so that you don't burn out. And then lastly, I just will mention, for many of us as researchers, our personal lives, our personal finances is tied to that level of productivity in fundraising. So do you sink or do you swim financially? And sometimes that is often what pushes people more towards the machine gun approach to apply for everything versus the sniper approach. But I'll just say this, and I'm hoping that you will get that in the course of this presentation. The best or the most successful presentations tend to be the ones that are most tailored to the donor. And sometimes if you're sending out, 5 applications a week or a month or something, you don't have the time or the energy to tailor your proposals adequately. So you need to strike a balance, understanding that the most successful proposals are the ones that are tailored to the donor. So just something to leave you with to think about. Moving on. Now, this is going to be one of the core parts of the presentation, the pre-proposal stage. I think that the most important part of a proposal is actually before you write it. And I'm going to go through a few points here, and I'm just going to talk us through it. So the first one is core values. And what I'm showing on the screen right now is called a value tree. And even though I have had decades of experience as a researcher, this is only something that I recently came across. I have a business mentor in the Yukon, and she introduced me to this. And she said that it was important for me to understand my core values as a person, so that I'm not betraying myself in business or in fundraising or in research. What are the things that are key, core, and important to me? Is it integrity? Is it building a community? Is it relationships? Is it finances? And no two people are going to have the same core values, but you need to be aware of what yours is. So I just thought I'd share this, because when you're going out there and you're trying to raise funds, sometimes the terms that will be attached to the funds may be at conflict with you. And you need to know that, so that you're not just receiving money to receive money and putting yourself in situations where you can't even look yourself in the mirror, just to couch it that way. The second, and this is something that I have a lot of experience with, is before you write a proposal, you need to think about the institutional or organizational objectives. This is especially if you are working for a research institution, a conservation organization, or some. If you're working for yourself, no problem, just default to your core values. But if you're working for an organization, it's something that you need to be aware of, that alignment of your values with that of the organization. Now, I say this because I've worked for different organizations, either as a staff or as a consultant. And sometimes I will get an idea, wait, let's do it this way. And they have to tell me, no, that's not what we do here. That's not how we do things. And sometimes it's a great idea, but it's not what the organization does. It doesn't fit with the organizational structure. So it's a great idea. You can go and raise funds for it, but that's not what they do. Now, if you were to go off and start doing this before you already put in the energy, it can be a little demoralizing. So one of the things that I learned to do very early on is to talk with my line manager when I have an idea. Before I write the proposal, before I give all that work to it, I learned to communicate it with my line manager and say, is this okay? Now, in certain organizations, there are also procedures for raising funds. You just don't go ahead and and raise just apply to the donor. BirdLife, for example, has different people who manage relationships with different donors, and applications to those donors will go through the relationship managers. So it's something to just be aware of going forward if you're thinking about fundraising, especially if it is within an organization. Next thing is the novelty of your idea. Is it a new idea? Some people say that you can't reinvent the wheel or you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. I think it's possible to reinvent the wheel. You just have to know when and how to reinvent the wheel, because the wheel has been reinvented in many ways. So is your idea new, or what is new about your idea? There's no point just taking a project that was done in one country and just bringing it somewhere else and saying that it's brand new. Exporting technology is simply that. You're just exporting it. If you're actually creating something new, then yeah, you need to find what is, it has to have some novel element to it. And then your actions need to be clear, as well as your goals. I talked about the fact that I would take my ideas to my line manager. I need to be able to communicate it very quickly and very clearly. Some will call that your elevator pitch. But you should be able to write if you think in pictures, you should be able to write it on a napkin. And while I was preparing for this talk, I found this. Apparently, this is what Jeff Bezos, this was the drawing that he did. This was his business plan for Amazon. And if you look at it very quickly, you can actually understand that growth and customer satisfaction were going to be the core themes to everything he was going to do. The lower prices, lower processes, and all of that were just going to feed into growth and customer satisfaction. That he could take it from his head, put it on a napkin, and then run with it. For those that are Christian, the Bible says that in the book of Habakkuk, it says, write the vision, make it clear upon tablets of stone, so that he may run with it who that sees it. And that is something about communicating clearly vision or the ideas that are in your head. Now, two more points: social impact, local or global. Think about the impact of this project that you want to undertake. Okay, because it's very important. It's your why. This is actually why you're doing this work. And usually, after you share your elevator pitch, the next question that should come from someone listening to you is, why do you want to do this? And what is that social change that you are trying to engineer? And lastly, your resources. Now, I put this last because by the time you've gone through all of this process, it usually comes down to, what do you need to get this thing done? And that's when we start thinking in terms of naira, dollars, pounds. But I'm going to say, don't start there. Think about your network and try to reduce your dollar amount as much as possible. This is the one so there's a line from this song: if I don't get money, I get place to borrow. And I think that it's very important to think that way in fundraising. Don't always think about it as, okay, we need 3 million for this project. If I have a friend who has equipment, if I have access to students who want projects to do, I've already cut down my manpower and I've cut down my equipment costs quite considerably. And that is something that you can show to donors. It's called co-financing. If you can show to donors that, listen, I can get certain resources from other places, then they're more willing to give you their money. And that is something that strengthens your project. It means that other people believe in what you're doing, so that other people are more likely to join the bandwagon. So it's something that I'll put out there. Think about it: access to equipment, access to personnel. Do you have a friend who can come and help with your project? Manpower, things like that. Be able to write them out or include them in your thinking at least, and let that guide the process. Now, as you're going through the pre-proposal stage, thinking things through, writing them on napkins and whatnot, the questions that you want to sort of address in your concept development are: what do we want to do? Where do we want to do it? When do we want to do it? Who is going to do it? Like, who's going to be involved? Who is the team? And then what are our methods? How are we going to do it? But again, the biggest question is, why are we doing this? You see, sometimes a number of people have talked to me about, oh, you've been quite successful with fundraising and this and that, and we're trying to write proposal for this, write proposal for that. And sometimes I always get the idea that they want to fundraise just so that they can have money. It's just so that they can have money, and I'm like, that is not reason enough. That why is not strong enough. It's that sink or swim. So I'm just trying to save my job. Sometimes we need to find a stronger why. So, and again, that is not to criticize in any way. It's just saying that one of the reasons why many proposals fail is that even in reading it, you can immediately tell that this person is just trying to get paid. Now, I'm going to take from lessons learned working with BirdLife. BirdLife did a survey many years ago of the BirdLife partnership in Africa, and they asked what were the biggest challenges to fundraising, and 3 were identified: identifying donors, matching projects to donors, to the right donors, and then presenting the project proposals in the right language to the donors. So I'm just going to expand on these a little bit. So the first challenge, finding donors or identifying donors. There are certain databases that are available. It's always evolving, so I am not putting a list of donor databases here. But if you Google, and it also depends on your field as well. But there are many databases, spreadsheets that list different donors in different sort of areas. When you get access to those donors, I believe that it's important to build your own donor database. It could just be an Excel spreadsheet or something. You list all your donors, and then you want to group them. So you want to group them by the interest of the donors. Remember, you need to think from the perspective of the donor. So what are the thematic interests? Which donors are interested in species, and what species? Which donors are interested in forest, in habitats? Which donors are interested in social development? Group them. And which donors are some donors are interested in conservation management action, some are interested in policy, some are interested in research. Group the different donors, and also group them in terms of spatial area. Some are interested in global work anywhere. Some are interested in work in Africa. Some are interested in work in sort of marine areas. So that ecological as well as spatial divide, you might want to let that guide you in shaping your donor database. The other thing that I think you should also include is the deadlines. Very often I get people coming up sort of asking for my feedback on a proposal, and usually I ask them, when's the deadline? And they're like, next week. I can't really do much. It's too late. But if you know what all the deadlines are going to be next year, you can plan. So you can be like a sniper, and you can set up your shots, and you know that, okay, you're ready for this particular donor maybe even 2 months before their deadline. It puts you're more prepared, and it gives that confidence. It builds that confidence in you. I mean, you have more confidence in yourself, but even the donor has more confidence in you, because you're already communicating with them ahead of the deadline. Your proposal is ready. You're not rushing. You're not sending the proposal on the day of the deadline. Things like that do matter. And then you also want to group them in terms of the budgets. How much are they allocating, as well as the expenses that they will cover. Some of us want to fund like if you're funding your research project, some donors, you cannot use their money for a degree. Some you can't, you can. Some donors, if you have an organization, they will not cover overheads, the administrative fees and all of that. They won't cover it. Some will. Some donors will actually not give you money. They will give you equipment, for example. You need to understand what box each particular donor is in. And then I talked about, so the fund allocation mechanism. Some donors will give you the full money once they approve your proposal. You get 100% of the funds. Some will give you partial, maybe 80%, and then 20% when you submit, the final report or the midway report or something. And others do a pre-finance where first you go and do the work, you find money to do the work, and then so you pre-spend, and then you show them the receipt, and then they reimburse the cost to you. So there are different ways different donors work, and you need to be aware of this before you even begin to start applying. Now, the next thing is matching your project to the donors, so your eligibility. So usually when I ask people about the deadlines, the next question is, are you eligible to apply? What is the eligibility criteria? You need to read that. And you want to categorize your donor database based on those that you are eligible for, or different people on your teams may be eligible for. So you may actually have somebody else lead on a particular proposal rather than you because they are more eligible or something. And then please, please, please read the donor data the website. Look at past projects that they funded, and also look at the current funding requirements. What do they need? What do they want? Because it does change. Organizations go through iterations of change, they evolve. So just because you knew what they did 5 years ago doesn't mean that that's what they're going to be doing today. Because they funded this project 5 years ago doesn't mean that they're going to fund it today. It's just to be aware of that. And then in terms of donor matching, you kind of want to network as well. So some call it schmoozing. You want to find past recipients, people who have received money, talk to them, become friends with them, because they'll be able to talk about their experiences and you can learn from that. The other one is you can pitch yourself to the donor. If there is a mixer, if there's an event and you know that certain donors are going to be there, go there and talk to them. You could even email a donor. You can even say, okay, I'm going to apply to this particular donor next year. So I'm going to email them this year and say, hi, I'm thinking about applying for this funding next year. This is a brief summary of what I'm applying for. Am I eligible? Some will turn you down outright and say, just apply, just go to the website and apply. Some will do that, but some will actually engage in a conversation with you and say, okay, well, that's a great proposal. We welcome that. Or no, we don't welcome that kind of proposal and this and that. So some will actually give you feedback, but I will be honest right now, some will turn you down outright. All right. So with all the time that we've spent so far, we are actually just getting to proposal writing itself. Please understand that before you start writing a proposal, the work that goes on before that is actually much more important than just jumping in and writing a proposal. And I say this because I have met many, many people who do that. They see that, 2 weeks to the deadline, this proposal is available, or this grant is available. Let's write. And they jump into writing. It's okay if you do that once or twice, but I feel that if that is the way you as an individual fundraise, or if that's the way you as an organization fundraise, it does not speak well of you. You need to take a more proactive approach to fundraising. You need to plan it out a year in advance so that you know what you're leading up to do. If you're an organization and you have staff, you need to know when people are going to go on holiday. and know when, because if people are on holiday and that's when you want to be writing proposals, that's going to fall on a few people, and you're going to be missing some of your the strongest people in your team. So you need to have a proposal strategy for a fundraising strategy for your organization. But even if you're not an organization, if you're an individual researcher, have a fundraising strategy for yourself. Think about the funds you're going to be raising next year. Don't just think only about what's in front of your nose, if that helps. And again, not a criticism, just advice that I'm hoping that we can all learn from. These are some of the things that I have learned in the years that I've been fundraising. All right, so just zipping on. When you're writing the proposal itself, of course, your writing skills matter. Use short, comprehensive sentences. Your verb tense is important. Um, Saying that we have done something is different from we are doing something, and it's also different from we are going to do something. So have a very consistent verb tense depending on what you're talking about, and whether you speak in the active or passive tense. Now, this is quite interesting because some donors prefer one tense. Now, just speaking generally, I would say that many American donors prefer the active tense. So that is, we are going to do this, we are going to do that. And several of the European donors prefer that passive tense. This will be done, and this will be achieved, and not necessarily we are going to do this. Know your donor, like I said. So even how you write can become donor specific. Then follow the writing instructions. Use the headings and subheadings that have been recommended. And when there is a word count, this is quite interesting now. You can write too much, and that is easy. They say 500 word count. If you write 510, you've done too much. But you can also write too little. Again, this is just something that I play with. I try to write at least 2/3 of the word requirement. So if they say it's a 500 word count, I won't stop at 100 words. It's too little. They're expecting a little bit more detail. So it's something to just keep in mind as well. Then there's the donor vocabulary. This is another reason why you read their website. Do they refer to wildlife or do they refer to species? Do they refer to ecosystems or do they refer to environments? Use their own language. Because when they are reading your proposal, because that's the language they use, they understand your words a lot better. So something else to take into my, and if they have any buzzwords, use them as well. This is something sort of a little bit outside of fundraising, but I did once apply for work with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and I remember that in part of the follow-up, I started using the connected thinking because they were using it a lot. So I used it, and I used it to make a lot of my arguments, and it worked. So the next thing is timelines and budgeting. Follow the expense guidelines when you're writing your proposal. Okay, anything that they say they're not going to fund, don't put it in your proposal. And then under the timeline and budgeting, it's always better to under promise and over deliver rather than the other way around. Many of us tend to over promise and under deliver. Remember, you are building a relationship, and after the funding, that is also very, very much important. And there's a question here. Do you request the full budget? So the donor says that they can fund up to 10,000. Do you ask for 10,000? I say that if you have $10,000 worth of expenses, yes. But if you don't, please do not inflate figures. The donors are in the same industry as you to some extent. They will know what flight costs, sort of the range can be. So please don't inflate too much. Get, a little bit a buffer, yes, for, unknowns, but yeah, please don't double figures or triple figures or anything like that. And then there is the question of co-funding or double funding. Now, this is very similar to tax evasion or tax reduction. Co-funding is when you want to do one thing and you get money from different people to cover different parts of the work. Double funding is when you get money from two people to do the same thing and you basically doubled the money. again, you're building relationships, okay? They will find out. And it's going to make you lose all credibility in that industry, in the conservation world. When you submit your proposal, accommodate internal pre-submission reviews. Even as an individual, if you want to send it to, a senior colleague to help you review it, make sure you give them time, 2 weeks, maybe even a month, to review it and get back to you. Don't send it to them the day before the deadline. So accommodate time for that. Then gather all necessary supporting documents. Always submit everything that is required. And ideally, you submit ahead of the deadline. One, it will generate goodwill. And two, they have time to actually acknowledge your application. Because remember, the day before the application closes is when most people would often be getting their application in. So they don't have time to listen to answer anybody's email. But if you applied a week before, a month before, they are more likely to answer and say, yes, we've received your application and everything is in order, or not. And please don't pester them. Be respectful when you're emailing or communicating with the donors, depending on the question that you have for them. And if everything goes well, the money will come down, right? But let's quickly talk about what happens if your proposal is denied. Now, if your proposal is denied, be gracious, okay? Don't get angry. Don't become bitter or anything like that. No. Be gracious as much as possible. Now, where possible, request feedback from them and say, thank you very much for reviewing our proposal. Please, if you have any feedback from the reviewers, we will greatly appreciate it. And then you can also ask if there is a possibility for resubmission, maybe of the same project or of a different project of a similar theme. Sometimes they will, not all donors will engage in that conversation, but some will. I learned a lot from receiving feedback on my failed applications. But again, don't pester them. If they say no, let it go. And then there is your network that helped you build that proposal. Let them know that, hey, the proposal was turned down, but thank you all very much for your for your assistance. And like all things, learn from your mistakes, adapt, and evolve. Become better. Now, if the proposal is approved, so this is one key one. When you know the decision period, try to make sure that you are available. Many of us go for field work, and sometimes we don't always have email and phone access. And sometimes you can't control when you're in the field. Try to make sure that maybe someone has access to your email that can just check for when they're going to, make the decision or something. So that because when they make the decision, sometimes they're waiting for you. They've decided they're going to fund you. You need to accept that. And if you're not around to accept it, sometimes they might move on to the next person on the pecking order. So you just want to have that in place. It would hurt if you do all this work and then people, you are not available. Then once you've accepted it, reassess your timelines, your budget, and your resources. Because someone who was available 2 months ago may no longer be available today or something like that. Confirm reporting schedules, both with your organization, which is internally, and with the donor, so that you know when you're expected to submit reports, especially if your timeline changes. Then you want to track your expenditure and your receipts. Make sure that you take pictures of all receipts and have a folder for all your spending so that things don't get lost. Track your project outputs and your challenges. Make sure you get photos of everything. And social media donor representation, check with your donor. You understand? How do they want to be mentioned? Do they want to be mentioned in social media by you or not? If they don't, then please don't mention them, or don't mention them in any way that they've explicitly told you not to mention them. So again, you are building relationships. And when there are changes, challenges, or delays, communicate this as soon as possible to the donor. When you finish your project, we're almost at the end. When you're coming to the end of the project that has been funded by that donor, double check with them. What does done look like? and that is what are the things they wanted to see to make sure that this project is actually completed. Check with them so that you make sure that, oh, they want a signboard. Oh, we want a banner. Oh, we want photos and we want a closing ceremony and we want to be there. Check all of these things so that you can make them happen. Then, of course, your final report, which is the narrative and the financials. Now, there's an interesting one. When you have budget surplus or budget deficit, you do need to report both. So if you have extra money, it's good to report it to the donor. Again, remember, post-funding, you are still building relationships. Then try to get donor feedback, because that is when you stand the best potential for repeated funding. And I have benefited from that. I've had donors, I got first funding from them. And because of the relationship and maintaining and checking with them for feedback, when I had another project come up, I could apply to them again. And they were like, oh, yeah, we know that guy, blah, 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 this and that. He's going to get the job done. And it's going to be a smooth relationship. And it's easier to get repeated funding. So that's something else you should consider. And once again, you want to inform and appreciate your network as well. So you're managing relationships with your donors, but you're also managing relationships with your network, people that support you, the person that wrote a reference letter, the person that helped you review things, and people that helped you work in the field. Keep all of them informed and appreciate them. And then you want to track your social impact, because that is why we're doing this at the end of the day. So this is the end of my talk. I hope it's a lot of information that I've sort of thrown out there. And I know the time is running a little bit short, but I look forward to any questions that you have. I say good luck with fundraising. And I use the Fitzpatrick logo because I maintain a seat as a research associate at the Fitz. You can email me directly if you're not able to get your questions out today. And with that, I would like to say thanks to the Nigerian Bread That Lasts Project for providing this platform for me to share, and say thanks to all of you once again for the honor of your time. Thank you.